Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study. Masechet Beitzah Daf Mem, page 40, and then the new Masechet Rosh Hashanah, pages 2 through 7, Bet through Zayin. Beitzah Mem. Ein muktzah Rabbi Shimon, el grogrot v'tzimukim bilvad. All throughout the tractate, we've known that there is a machloket between Rabbi Shimon, who has a narrow application of muktzah, and Rabbi Yehuda, who has a wider application of muktzah. And so when it comes to foodstuffs that were put aside, but are potentially edible, in the view of Rabbi Shimon, none of that's going to become muktzah, except for two things: grogrot, figs that are drying, and simukim, grapes that are drying, turning into raisins. That those items, when they are set aside, they are done for a long haul, that they're not going to be eaten for a long while, and they're in this liminal stage, this intermediate stage, where they're basically inedible. They go from being fresh fruits that are edible to eventually dried fruits which are edible, but in between, they're no good. So the grogrot simukim are examples of things which are off-limits muktzah, even in the view of Rabbi Shimon, with his narrow application. Now, Rosh Hashanah, Daf Bet. We are told that the first of Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah, the new year for the kings, for the Malachim. So the question is, what happens if a king arises on the throne very late in the year, just shortly before the first of Nisan? Will he have his reign reckoned as a second year after that new year date? So Melech Shamad b'Chavtet be'Adar, a king is crowned on the 29th of Adar. The very next day, it's no longer his first year, it's now his second year on the throne, because he's passed the threshold of Rosh Hashanah. Daf Gimel. So the Gemara here says that the first day of Nisan is a Rosh Hashanah LaMalachim, a new year for the kings, but only for Jewish kings. Lo shanu ela lamalchei Yisrael, aval lamalchei umot haolam mitishri maninan. But as for heathen kings, idolater, Gentile kings, their years are going to be reckoned from the first of Tishrei. Now, there's a certain logic to this, and that is that the first of Tishrei is the new year for the reckoning of years. L'Briat Haolam, from the creation of the world, and how we generally regard the calendar. That Tishrei, September-October time, is the new Jewish year, and the new universal year. So, for all the other nations of the world, we'll reckon the beginning of their king's reign from that turning of the page, that Aleph Tishrei. Only for the Jews, for the nation of Israel, which experienced the exodus from Egypt, Yetziat Mitzrayim, which happened in Nisan, should the month of Nisan be at all relevant, and therefore only for Malchei Yisrael is the first of Nisan a turning point. Daf Daled. The Gemara here cites a classic Talmudic expression, Tafasta meruba, lo tafasta. Tafasta muat, tafasta. If you try to grab too much, you'll be left with nothing. But if you grab a modest amount, you'll have it stay in your hand. What's the topic of conversation? The issue at hand is tashlumim, the compensatory days to offer holiday sacrifices, just in case you did not offer the festival offerings on the holiday itself. Meaning Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, or Shlosh Regalim, 3 pilgrimage holidays. You're supposed to bring an Olat Riyah and a Shalmei Chagiga, 2 sacrifices on the first day of the holiday. If you didn't do it, then you have the entire rest of the holiday to satisfy that obligation. But what about Shavuot, which is only a 1-day holiday? So shall we compare the compensatory law on Shavuot to Pesach and say that you have a total of 7 days? Or should we compare it to Sukkot and say you have a total of 8 days? Because after all, Sukkot has Shmini Atzeret attached to it, so it's an 8th day. To this, the Gemara says, Tafasta meruba lo tafasta. If you try to grab 8 days and compare Shavuot to Sukkot, you're left with nothing. You have to compare it to Pesach, and then you have something. So it's a 7-day compensatory period for Shavuot. Daf Hey, 5. V'haya b'chachet, v'lo b'korban chachet. The rule is that you have to satisfy your sacrificial requirements within a reasonable amount of time. If you delay inordinately, you are guilty of bal te'acher, do not delay. Torah says you must do it on time. Well, the question is, what is considered on time, what is considered delayed? And there are various Tanaic opinions as to whether you're allowed 1 holiday to pass, 2 holidays to pass, 3 holidays to pass, only Sukkot, or 3 holidays in the proper sequence, with Sukkot being last. Whatever the halacha might be of the various Tanaic opinions, the Gemara here is saying that if you violated the rule and you were late, you have a sin, but the sacrifice is still brought, and the sacrifice is still kosher, it's still valid. That your dilly-dallying does not negate the validity of the korban. Okay. Daf Vav, page 6. Yoresh mahu bevalta acher. What is the status of someone who inherits an animal, a sacrificial animal? Can that person be guilty of balta acher, of delaying the bringing of the offering? So there are two sides to the coin. On the one hand, kitidor neder huv ala neder. The Torah speaks about a case where a person makes a neder, a vow, a promissory vow. But this person, who is the yoresh, the heir, he didn't make a vow. He just inherited the situation. So maybe the law simply doesn't apply to him. Or Dilma, or alternatively, ubata shama veitim shama, you shall go there and bring the offering. V'hamachayev, and he's obligated to do so. So maybe if he's obligated to bring the korban, he's obligated to play by the rules of the timing of the korban. And what does the Gemara answer? Tashma, meimach prat yoresh, that from you means to exclude the yoresh, to exclude the heir. So ultimately, the heir has to bring the korbanot that he inherited from his predecessors, but the timing of the matter and the violation of being late will not apply to the yoresh, to the heir. Daf Zayin, page 7. Yesh omrim af l'schirut batim. So some say that the first of Nisan, among the various things for which it is a new year, is also a new year for apartment leases, for rentals of a home, of a place of residence. And accordingly, if a person were to have a rental agreement that says, I rent it for this year, l'shana zu, that once the first of Nisan passes, the year is over. So if a person were to say for a year, it would be a full 12 months. But if they say this year, then it means this year as reckoned by the calendar of Schirut Batim. And if the new year is Aleph Nisan, then once Aleph Nisan passes, it's no longer that year, and the lease is over. Everyone have a good week.